Hello, everybody, and welcome to Speak with Power show live with Leonovsky. My name is Leonovsky, and with me today is Debbie Rosemont. Debbie is internationally known organizational guru, productivity guru, and today she's going to share with us some of the key ways to organize. More specifically, I am here for a selfish reason of figuring out how multitasking makes me stupid and how to get smarter about my schedule. Welcome, Debbie.
Thanks, Leo. I'm really glad to be here.
So tell a little bit more about what your passion is and what is it that you help organizations do and individuals do about as far as organization is concerned.
Sure. My passion is really helping people have the time for what matters most for them. So for the companies that hire us, they're interested in having their employees have time to work on their priorities and the ability to focus on priorities. So we'll talk about that word focus today. Yeah, but I also think that as important as it is to, be able to contribute at work, when we can do that effectively and efficiently, we feel better and we're able to have time for what's important to us outside of work as well. And that makes us a better entrepreneur if we're in business for ourselves, a better employee if we're working for somebody else, and a better person to whomever else is in our life. So that's my passion, is really helping people make the most of their time and have time for what matters to them so that they can really rise to be the people that they are.
In a way, this is good because my passion is to ignite people's passions. But sometimes I know certainly for myself, I have a hard time organizing myself to actually do the right things first. So your skill set is absolutely critical. So tell me a little bit more about, why do people multitask? What is it about multitasking that's so attractive? I can tell you my story, but tell me what you've learned.
Well, I'll tell you what I've learned, and I want to hear your story. I think that it's a lot due just to the society we live in. We live in a super fast-paced society where there is so much information available to us, so many things that we could be doing, and so many demands on our time that most people multitask because they feel like they have to. They have these long to-do lists, and they feel the pressure that in order to get it all done, they ought to be doing more than one thing at a time. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And unfortunately, science and studies show it doesn't work the way that we think it will. And I think that, the multitasking and the word busy, they've both been glorified. And I read once, stop the glorification of busy. Just because we're doing a lot of things doesn't necessarily mean we're doing the right things. And just because we, are doing more than one thing at once, it doesn't mean that we're going to get them done any better than if we were to focus on one thing at a time. In fact, the opposite is true.
And for me, I'll be honest, when I drive, I'm bored, right? So I'm trying to do a couple of things. I'm trying to make phone calls as I'm driving. I'm trying to solve problems as I'm driving. I'm not really ever present in any one place. And one of the things for me that my wife just noticed yesterday, as she was lazying on the bed watching Orange is the New Black, and I'm like, oh my God, I still have so much to do, and this is Sunday night. She's like, well, you never relax.
Yeah. And like, the other thing that you mentioned is that you and many other people become easily bored, and that is in part because, again, with so much available to us in technology and so many distractions and things that are interesting, our attention span has become so short that it's hard for people who have been now trained to, quick look at email and quick look at the text messages that have come in and check Facebook messages and text, and there's always new information, and some people you've heard of FOMO, fear of missing out. FOMO, FOMO, fear of missing out. But if I'm not in all these places at one time, I'm going to miss something. And again, it doesn't allow us to focus on our priorities.
FOMO. That's my new acronym for the day, ladies and gentlemen. FOMO. I'm really FOMO'd. Fear of missing out. Okay. Okay. So, and how does that translate to organization?
If we try to do everything and we try to do everything at one time, it's scattered, it's fragmented, it's choppy. It doesn't have a good flow. It's usually not organized. And maybe we should define too what I mean when we talk about multitasking, because you mentioned, being bored in the car, and I know people who, when they drive, maybe they're listening to the radio, or maybe they're listening to an audio cast or CD and learning something while they're driving. And so do we call that multitasking? Well, kind of. If you know where you're going, could you also listen to something that's either entertaining or educational? I think you can. I mean, people do it all the time. You also mentioned spending time on the phone while you're driving, and as long as you're doing that hands-free and as safe as possible, although your concentration, even when you're hands-free, is still divided on the drive and the phone call, there is technology to be able to do that. So when we talk about multitasking today, what I'm really talking about are two tasks that take thinking power that we need to consider or be cognitive of, not walking and chewing gum at the same time. I mean, that's awesome. Doing two things at the same time.
What you're saying is, if if something is automated already, I mean, when I started driving, it was definitely not automated, but now I drive and I don't even know how I get there. So once we're, for all intents and purposes, automated actions, you can multitask, but it's not really multitasking because the conscious brain is not involved in more than one task.
Right. Although, if we think about it, and sometimes when life is really busy and I'm experiencing more stress, to just drive and not have noise, to have that silence and just be with that drive is great also. And if you haven't tried that for a while, just sit with the boredom that you're experiencing and let your mind process some things, and just focus on the drive, focus on, the scenery around you, and focus on where you're going and mentally preparing for that. It's an interesting experience if you haven't done it for a while.
So, okay, here's another one, guys, to tweet. Sit with your boredom. This is a tweet. Sit with your boredom as you're multitasking. Okay, well, so what is the most common example of multitasking that you see in the workplace, and how does that affect actual productivity at work?
It is being on the phone, most commonly in a conference call, and sending email at the same time. That is the most common thing.
Yeah, I've never done that. Never.
Yeah, it's just thinking about when we're on the phone for work, when we're on a conference call. We could become bored, or it takes a long time, or it fills, let's say, an hour of our time. Could we get something else done, especially if we're working remotely and no one else can see us? That temptation to do more is definitely there, and I can relate to it too. I could also hide behind my coffee cup and say, I've done it. I know, right? Yeah. But if we think about what we could be getting out of the experience of that conference call, I'm going to assume we're on the call because we're either expected to contribute something, or somebody hopes we're going to learn something out of it, or we hope we're going to learn something out of it. When we start multitasking, we take away our ability to do that. We take away our concentration and our ability to take in new information. We definitely take away some of our ability to contribute. And so that's, again, common workplace example, but it's at a cost.
So, and so what is the ultimate costs of that for the company? How does, it's such a hard time. I'm thinking that the managers who are listening to this, are cringing because they're like, well, how am I going to tell my employees to stop multitasking when I am multitasking like right now? I have Frank Clark here, who is an old good friend of mine here on Blab and co-founder of Startup Con Live, and he's a CFO. One of his companies just went public a year ago, and he is multi-blabbing, right? He's multitasking and multi-blabbing on two or more blabs at the same time, right? So how does the manager deal with this issue? I mean, from themselves or their clients or their employees?
So you asked about, what's the ultimate cost? The cost of multitasking is multifold. When people are trying to do more than one thing at a time, they are more likely to make mistakes. So in that example of I'm on the conference call plus I'm sending an email at the same time, when I'm sending that email, I'm more likely to make a typo, have an error in that email. And that could be a small mistake. I could misspell a word that is inconsequential, or it could be a large mistake if I'm sending out financial numbers to somebody and I put a comma in the wrong place or an extra zero in the wrong place. It could have a huge impact to opportunity for a company. So the cost to a company is in mistakes, and that could vary, but also to the person. There is, again, inside a hormonal kind of stress reaction that happens when we try and do more than one thing at a time or try to pay attention to more than one thing at a time. Cortisol in our system rises. We could feel anxious. We could feel, sweaty palms, some people, increased body temperature, just that anxiety that our brain is telling us that we're trying to do two things at a time, and are we missing something over here or over here because of it? So when there's stress, undue stress in an organization, that costs the company money in healthcare, in sick days, employees not being able to be there when they need to do their work. So those are a couple examples.
Well, that's really powerful. And if I was to summarize what you just said, the negative feedback loop here is that multitasking is making me anxious about multitasking, and which makes me want to multitask more, which the cause of it is not that, I would explain that I'm multitasking because I have too much to do, right? I would explain it that I have too much to do, I'm anxious, and therefore I'm multitasking. But what you're saying is the equation is actually more complicated, where multitasking makes me anxious about what I need to do. So it's a backward equation. And there are real physical costs.
There are physical, emotional, financial, for sure.
Wow. All right. So it makes me stupid, right? It makes me react. Cortisol drives the blood away from my frontal cortex. I know that. And makes me look for lions and tigers and try to run away from them. So tell me what's the alternative? Because it can this be learned?
Yes, it can be learned, and I think understanding the cost is the first thing, because when you really know what's happening when you try to multitask, you're less likely to want to do it because it's counter to what you're attempting. So let me go back just for a second before I talk about what to do about it and make another point on the title of this presentation and this talk, the multitasking makes you stupid. I didn't just make that up. It was an article that I read back in 2003 in the Wall Street Journal, and it was written by a woman named Sue Schellenberger, and I was just caught by the title. Who says multitasking makes you stupid? What does that mean? And why did she choose that title? And her article explained that when we are multitasking, again, we actually are slower at doing both the things we're trying to do. Our rate of error goes up, our stress level goes up, and here's why she titled the article the way that she did, the ability to learn new things and remember things goes way down. So that's the makes you stupid part is, again, our ability to learn new things and to remember things goes way down when we're multitasking.
So somebody tweet that. Somebody tweet that right now. That multitasking decreases our ability to learn.
Yeah, it does, and to remember.
Wow, so, and to remember.
Yeah.
What did you say? I'm sorry, I was too busy typing Sue Schellingberger. Multitasking makes me stupid. What did you say? No, see, that's my point, right?
Exactly.
But it's addictive.
It is, and again, that's the so much input, this fire hose of input and technology, and feeling like we need to do more than one thing. But again, if we know that truly it slows us down, there was another an author and a speaker named Dave Crenshaw, and he coined this term. Instead of multitasking, what our brain is actually doing is switch tasking. So when we are trying to consider or think about two things at the same time, our brain has to stop, put the brakes on one train of thought, and then switch over to another. And there's where we lose time, because our brain cannot think about two things at exactly the same time. It has to stop, put on the brakes, and then switch over. So think about the term switch tasking, and again, it's just not as effective as focusing on one thing at a time.
Okay, so you convinced me. I will not type the brilliant pieces that you are saying in the send message as I'm listening to, because I will not learn as much. So somebody else do it. Come on, Frank. But the idea is switch tasking, right? So this is versus multitasking.
Yeah.
Okay.
An example.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
As an example I could give, if people want to experience what that feels like, if I asked you, Leo, to say your ABCs, you do it quickly.
Mm-hmm.
If I asked you to count from 1 to 10, you do it quickly.
Mm-hmm.
If I asked you to alternate A1, B2, C3 between the letters and the numbers, it would take you longer to get to, through the alphabet and to number 26 than it would just to say the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s, because your brain has to, again, switch between letters and numbers and letters and numbers.
All right, now, let's try it, guys. Right? So A1, B2, C3, D4, E. Yeah, I see that there's that E5, F6, H.
And it's the where was I over here and where was I over here. So the same thing is happening, and that's a super basic example. And could you learn to do that? Of course, you could memorize and you could learn to say the letters and numbers. But that's just a simple example to kind of illustrate what's happening with your brain.
So let me stop here for just one moment and give an interesting piece here from communication point of view. And Debbie, this is because you are teaching me a great deal. So here's a learning moment. What you've just done, this is an example of a proof in the pudding. The idea of, say your ABCs, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, right? So, see, I messed up already. I should know. I have a 3-year-old and a 21-year-old. They know this. But the point is, I can go fast, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But then giving those two exercises and then asking me to mix them up drives home this message, which then you can deliver. So the idea is very often the best way to deliver the information is through this visceral example.
Right.
Of multitasking. And that is a brilliant way to do it. So my big takeaway from this is if I would want to convince someone of stop more multitasking or slow down and think about it, I will do the 1A, 2B exercise.
Yeah. And I think as you are coaching people and speaking, and anybody listening is wanting to present or train or speak, it's just encouraging that interactivity as well to hold and to help hold people's attention. Because like you said, we get bored easily. And so to switch it up to, I'm just listening to, ooh, now you're asking me to do something, let me engage. It's helpful in keeping people's attention as well.
Awesome. So when you come into an organization, give me an example. My stories are powerful. I teach on this show how stories are powerful. So give me a story of how you've actually engaged a leader, specific leader, and shifted the multitasking or switch tasking phenomena, or cured the epidemic.
I would say just really, again, starting out with pointing out the costs, showing the evidence, and then teaching that leader. And again, I can think of a couple of examples.
So give me one for sure.
Okay.
Because examples are the most powerful ways to.
Yeah.
Creating physical examples and giving specific stories is the most powerful way. So tell me about a story. When, where, how, who, and what happened.
So let's take a client of mine, Delta Dental of Washington. I worked with a leader in their sales environment who not only had sales goals of her own, but also needed to be leading a team. And she had so much on her plate that she was tempted to multitask, try and get it all done at the same time, and it just wasn't working well for her. So she was overwhelmed with the volume of work and feeling that stress that I described of trying to manage multiple things at one time. She was a great example of being on the phone with a prospect and doing something else at the same time, where there was then a lost opportunity because she didn't hear something that prospect was saying. So that was an example that was shared. So when we could teach her, as well as others on her team, to focus, they actually were saving time and realizing more sales opportunity because of it.
So what exactly? So let's talk about nitty gritty then.
Sure.
What is it? What are some of the things that you advised? And what was her name?
I'm gonna to protect it.
Yeah.
Yeah, to protect the innocence, I won't share names.
Just call her. Let's call her
Mary.
Mary, perfect. So when Mary is, so what did you do when you came in with your team to Mary and you saw that? You showed her the costs.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this was one of a number of things that we were working on together. So I helped her, learn to better effectively manage and organize the way she processed email and to use tasks, a task list to prioritize. And then we talked about this multitasking, that while she's working on a priority task, to just focus on it. One of the techniques that I gave her was to just remember the concept and the phrase right now. So right now, Leo, I'm talking with you on Lab with this community. I'm not trying to do anything else. Right now, I'm present and focused on this in the hopes that I can add value and hopefully get something out of the interaction as well. If I start to try and do something else at the same time, I'm not going to be in a position to add as much value or get as much out.
Right.
So the phrase right now can help someone recenter and bring them back to what they're doing, who they're interacting with. It just makes for richer relationships, whether in business or in personal life, to remember this phrase right now.
So the operating word is right now. By the way, if you were to create a presentation around that, as you are right now, both words would be a perfect ground for an acronym. Since people remember, you want them to remember the word right now, and then it can actually be a piece of it could be a code for right is 5 now is, so it's 8 points. that you can modify into your presentation. You know, I'm a sucker for acronyms. But right now, and that's a reminder to ground me in the present.
And the other thing that I did with Mary, as well as that I do when I teach this class for organizations, is I give them a visual reminder. So I give them it's just a focus stone. It's a shiny rock, because I love shiny objects. So I give them a shiny rock, and I ask them to consider this rock as their reminder of the phrase right now. So if they take this rock and if they associate it with the phrase right now, and they put the rock where they're going to see it regularly throughout their workday. So if someone's working at a computer, right at the top of their keyboard, if they're on the phone a lot, near the phone. But if they feel like their attention has drifted from the priority that they're working on, they see this rock and they're like, oh yeah, that's right now. Right now I'm doing the blab.
Wow.
So, and the technical term for that is a memory cueing device. It's just, again, it's helping anchor a phrase or a new habit with something visual, because everybody learns and adopts habits in different ways. So for someone who needs a visual reminder, this is a great trick.
Wow. Okay. So memory cueing device.
Right.
Like a shiny rock.
I mean, it can be anything that you have around, or that you know go pick up and that you find to be interesting. I keep it small so that it doesn't take up a lot of space or add clutter, and then anchor it.
Yeah, because you're also decluttering.
Yeah,
you're also a decluttering agent. So
that's right. That's right.
You don't want people to clutter or declutter. But I love that idea, and creating that symbol.
Right.
Do you have a memory cueing device on your desk too?
I do. Let me see if I can grab it here.
Do it.
So I have a rock. I don't know if you can see it. If it's gonna look.
Hold it right there. Hold it right there, and I'm going to post it on. Yep, I posted it on. I think I posted. I should have. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah, it's just mine happens to say organize, and somebody gave it to me as a gift, and I use this as that memory cueing device to help anchor me. I see you can create and imagine. That's lovely. Inspire.
And notice organize is not one of them.
Yeah, well, we all have our gifts.
But you know what? These are these three are my the three things that I do well, and organize is yours. And I think that whatever it is, I love holding them and I love feeling them. Mm-hmm. And so the idea for anyone to look up a rock like this, and you said, put it right where you could see it. Yeah. And that's something that I haven't done. It was on my windowsill. Mm-hmm. But the idea is it would be awesome potentially because on this side I could just create a tag, right? Sure. And that says right now, right? Imagine right now, create right now, inspire right now. But it's right now. It's now what matters. It's not later. And so one thing at a time.
Right.
And so how do you determine when to stop or when interruptions come in? What do you advise? Because it's everywhere, right?
Sure. The first thing is to try to minimize interruption to the best of your ability for a period of time so that you can focus on priority work. So if we think about what our interruptions are, often we're interrupting ourselves. We're stopping right in the middle of what we're doing to see what new email has come in, or to check and see if we have any text messages, or what's new on Facebook, or, and I could go on and on about the ways that we interrupt ourselves. So that's the first is, that we have absolute power over. So, what can we do to minimize the way we interrupt ourselves? And sometimes setting a timer for a period of time. I love the time timer. I'll show it to you. Again, it's very visual. So I can set this by, just moving this little dot over and say, okay, for the next 25 minutes, I'm not checking email. I'm not going to get up out of my seat. I am just going to be here and focus on something. And as the time passes, this red will go away, and I'll be able to see where I'm at, and I'll be able to see when it's time to stop and get up and stretch and do something different. Because again, trying to stay on one thing all day long is probably pretty difficult for most people. So chunking activity, so deciding what about this project I need to work on could I get done in 25 minutes, and then deciding to focus on that for 25 minutes, and when I'm finished with that chunk or that 25 minutes, doing something different for 5 or 10 minutes before starting another 25-minute chunk.
Wow. Okay, so you're suggesting 25-minute chunks with a 5-minute break of doing something in between. And I know for myself, I am so guilty of this. I either waste 2 hours, 3 hours at a time, or I sit there and I hyper-focus for 5 or 6 or 7 hours at a time. And like my legs go numb.
Yeah.
Have you ever been there? I don't know about you guys in the audience, but I clearly am sitting in this chair and I get up and like my legs start to tingle because I've been sitting for so long. Like I got to get blood in my legs. Yeah. And I realized, man, how effective was I here? Because there is very difficult for me to measure my efficiency. What was the name of that clock that you mentioned?
It's called the Time Timer, and it's available. Time Timer. So we sell it ourselves. We just have the one 3-inch that we use with clients. We sell. Simply placed, right? Yeah, but also timetimer.com, because they have other sizes. They have electronic versions. They have a watch. This is the 3-inch square. They have an 8 and a 12. So again, I've worked with clients who buy one for their conference rooms because they want to keep meetings on time, and the old-fashioned kind of analog clock isn't working. I had a couple of law firms buy one for every one of their associates, and so anyway, it's a helpful tool.
Well, I mean, if those of you who are listening to this either live or recorded, here's a really simple piece. And I think what I love about this suggestion is that it's not on my phone. It's not an app. Mm-hmm. Because the problem is, this is my number one culprit.
Yeah. Distraction.
For multitasking. Mm-hmm. It's like basically a drug dealer. This is a pimp. I am suggesting, Debbie, here's a new concept for you, because it's all about symbols. I am really encouraging you, as those of you who are listening, creating your own projects, creating symbols as much as possible, mm-hmm. and then coding them. So a phone could be, it's a time switching, or what did you call it? Not time switching.
Switch tasking.
Switch tasking pimp.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And a drug dealer. It does both. It pimps you out to others. Mm-hmm. Right. Oh, I'm available. He is available. I can call him whenever. And it makes me addicted, because I use this. I feel more productive because I'm doing more. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But am I more productive now? Right? Yeah. Is this? I used to have a flip phone. Right. You've had a flip phone. All of you have had a flip phone. Mm-hmm. Are you actually more productive now? And in what way? How do you qualify? And so I could think of one or two ways, but in general, no. Right. I waste a lot more time on games and such, right. And interruptions. So your point is really, really well taken. So a couple of things: focus stone, mm-hmm. right now stone, the time timer.
Right. Help you keep on track for a certain period of time, and say no to interruptions.
Say no to interruptions, and then how do you prioritize? Because I have the hardest time. Mm-hmm. And keeping myself to those priorities. Right.
So the phrase "failing to plan is planning to fail." I think it was Benjamin Franklin that originally said that, but we could look it up. But I wholly believe that we get a great return on investment when we do spend a little bit of time planning out what we need to do. So my recommendation is to, at the end of your work day, take 10 minutes to bring closure to that day and set yourself up for success for the next, which means looking at your tasks. It means you also need to have some sort of task management system where you're collecting your to-dos and identifying when you need to do them. So you're looking at the things you said you needed to do the next day, and then deciding which of those things is the highest priority. Which of them will make the biggest impact to the work that you do? Which will make the biggest impact to moving your big projects, the things that are most closely tied to your reason for being, and whether that, again, is at work or in your own business or in personal life, what moves the needle the farthest forward if you were to get that done? That's your highest priority. So you put a 1 by it or move it to the top of the list. And then you go down the list asking that question again for the next set of tasks. What's the next most important thing that would make the biggest difference if I were to get it done? You then go home or you end your work day and you come in the next day and you've already got a prioritized to-do list. Now, I recognize that, sometimes we can have the best laid plans and then we do get these interruptions or a fire drill happens and somebody says, I need you right now. Do you drop your list or do you ask of that, what that person needs? How does that measure up against what you had already identified as your highest priority? And this could be, a new email that came in overnight or, whatever the demand is. Is it a higher priority than what you had already identified as such? And if so, fine, that thing moves into the number 1 position. But if not, then you can say to that person or to that interruption, I would love to help right now. See, there's that phrase again. Right now, I need to do this. I can help you this afternoon.
Wow.
So the sticking with it does take some discipline. But it's also just knowing that if you are constantly in email and working based on what's coming in new or the interruptions that you might have in person and constantly entertaining those, that's a super reactive way to work. You are doing everybody else's priorities, but maybe not your own. So how to be more proactive is to make your plan, understand what your priorities are, and then to work those, measuring anything else that comes up against that list.
So can you show me what was your list? Do you put it on your computer? Do you put it on your phone? Where do you keep your list of priorities and how do you organize it?
So I use Outlook. I use Office 365. I use Outlook. I use the tasks feature. And so that's where I would prioritize my tasks. I can drag and drop them into priority order. And I'll also say that, if you don't get it done at the end of the day, some people have to leave work suddenly, they need to go pick up kids, or they need to, just drop and go. And if you can't do that at the end of the day, it's a brilliant way to start your day. So it doesn't matter so much when it happens, but make it happen. So for anybody, listening to this now, if you haven't made a prioritized to-do list for today yet, when we're done here, do that next so that you can take control of your time in your day and have something to work from that will give your work more meaning because you'll be able to be more proactive.
Brilliant, brilliant. And how many things on your priority list? Because one of the things I tackle is I create a list and then it freaks me out because it has like 50 things on it.
Right. Yeah, that's too many. And the other thing that I would say is it's going to depend on, what types of things you're putting on your list. Are you putting micro tasks that will take, 5 minutes each to do? If so, you could do 50 in a day. That's 100 minutes of time. And sorry, not 100 minutes of time, but anyway, 50 times 5 minutes, 250 minutes of time, and that could happen. But if you're putting things on your list that take an hour to do, or or longer, you have to think about the amount of time you have and what meetings do you have? What other commitments do you have to other people? So making your list in conjunction with your calendar is really important.
Perfect. So by tasks, you don't mean like meetings and events. We're talking about things like high priority quadrant 2 activities or quadrant 1 activities.
Sure.
They're critical.
Yeah, and meetings and events can certainly fit in those quadrants, but those are typically already on your calendar, and you've reserved the time for them. It's the other things that aren't on your calendar, and you know, for some people, scheduling these tasks too helps. You know, there's that phrase, what gets scheduled gets done. And so some people will schedule their tasks on their calendar, and that's another way to make a prioritized to-do list.
Right. That's really powerful. So we're coming up to the end of the hour. I personally have been absolutely thrilled to see, to hear some of these tips. I think that a couple of takeaways that I have is have a right now stone. The other one is have a time timer or some type of reminder. But most importantly, having a list of top priorities that it becomes a habit to do either at the end of the day or the first thing of the day, of making sure that there is a list of very specific tasks, of a small number of tasks that I can accomplish, that then I prioritize in the order of their importance, and compare any other interruptions, measure them against the importance of those things.
Right. And then just know that when you are focusing on a high priority task, if you can avoid multitasking, you will be more effective and more efficient in getting that task done.
Okay, so when I find myself multitasking right now.
Yep, stop it.
Right now. Okay, got it. Before we end our session, because it's been absolutely fantastic to hear this information, who is your ideal client in terms of connecting you to the right people? Because I'm sure that those people who are listening to this live or recorded may say, oh, I would love to do this at my office, but you don't know my boss. You don't know how crazy our society is. If I tell people no, they'll basically fire me, and right? So who do you need to talk to make that big change in the organization?
Yeah. So we are often brought in by whoever in an organization is responsible for employee learning and development. So that might be an HR manager, it might be a training manager, it could just be a manager of a division or department. Often it's a forward-thinking leader, someone who recognizes that their employees are their greatest asset, and they want to invest in their employees because they understand the return on investment that they're going to get. So companies that have training programs, who do training consultants, who want to make sure that every new employee, for example, gets off on the right foot because they understand that's going to help for employee retention. They want to make sure that opportunities are not falling through the cracks, and when they equip their employees with tools and strategies for managing their time, their tasks, and their emails, they have better customer service. They're able to get more done in less time with less stress, and that brings in more revenue to the company. So those are the kinds of people that we do our best work with. And again, it can be a HR manager that we start the conversation with, but often it's a leader who says, I want to get more out of my people, and come help us with that.
Brilliant, brilliant. So if you are one of those leaders listening to this, how do they reach you? How do they reach out to you?
They can, pick up the phone and give us a call at 206-579-5743. They can send an email to info@itssimplyplace.com or Debbie@itssimplyplace.com, and that's also our website where certainly someone could get more information. www.itssimplyplace.com, and I can put that
at It's Simply Placed.
I'm putting it in the comments right
now. Put it into the message. Yeah. That's brilliant. I think that the story that you tell here is one of something to think about, something to stop and not multitask while thinking about it, and actually put it in action. There are very specific steps that you've given us here, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Let me just change the subject just a little bit, and that is, what role does communication play in your business?
Effective communication in the workplace absolutely impacts productivity. That's without question. And I think clarity in communication, channels of communication chosen correctly, also impact workplace productivity. So, when do we communicate that way? When do we pull people together physically and hold a meeting because the face-to-face and in-person communication is going to be important? How do we delegate from manager to employee and communicate what we need to have happen with a task effectively and efficiently? I think when people in business are able to be clear, concise, and effective with their communication, more gets done, right? Make a bigger impact.
So what kind of things do you personally, as you reach out to these businesses, how do you speak with power? How do you shape your message so that it reaches the audience? What has been your experience? How do you not multitask in your presentation? Because that's the other thing I see. I see people try to cover too much in their presentation and get nothing. So I could totally I could talk about multitasking in communication as well.
Sure. I think the first thing, again, the word that comes to me is clarity. So for me, I'm seeking clarity and understanding who the audience is. So, what is the work that these individuals I'll be speaking with or working with, what do they do? Do I understand it? Do I understand their reality? Do I understand the language that they speak? And I don't mean, the English language or, another language, but do I understand the terminology? Do I understand who they interact with and what demands are on their time? And when I can do that, and I do that by interviewing employees before I go into a company to present, I speak with the leaders of the organization, and then I can customize my message, whether that's going to be delivered through individual consulting or group training. I can customize it to be effective for that audience.
For those of you who are just joining us, Debbie Rosemont is an organizational guru with It's Simply Placed, and she's also a nationally known speaker. So one of the things we've just finished talking about, some of the fantastic tips on time management and not multitasking, on multitasking, single tasking. And now what I've asked her is just how to communicate that message. How does she communicate that message? And clarity is really important. And the other thing you mentioned is preparation. Right. Preparation, knowing your audience. You're telling me that you interview the employees, you interview the leaders, you do the research ahead of time. You understand their priorities before you share yours. Right. And I think that is really critical in communication. And that's the preparation, which is very similar to what you're asking me to do every day at the end of the day, by understanding my needs and the needs of my priorities so that I can create the schedule for myself. Right. And that's brilliant. It sounds like you do a lot of work with corporations, but if someone wants to get more of this information for themselves, are there any other consulting practices you do or workshops? And is there anything online? I know I am introducing you to Blab. So are there other online opportunities ahead for you?
So on the website, we have a blog, and we do share, posts a couple times a week that hopefully offer some value for someone who's interested in just learning more about various topics related to organization and productivity. So heading to the website and taking a look there. There's some videos on YouTube. We've got a YouTube channel, Simply Placed. And those also will be integrated occasionally into the blog. And then we're active in some social media channels. So if somebody just wants to join a conversation on our Facebook page or through LinkedIn, we certainly can be found there as well. The work that we do with organizations is both with large and small organizations. So, we can come in for a consultation, we could do a group training. There's a variety of ways to engage with us. And we also do virtual work. So we can, through Skype or phone, work with individuals who we might not be able to travel to or who want to work in that way. And so virtual is always an option as well.
Brilliant. Well, again, thank you so much. It sounds like you're bringing an incredible amount of value to your customers, and I certainly have gotten a lot of value here. I'm sure there are people on this call who've gotten value. So again, thank you so much, Debbie. And those of you who are watching, enjoy this and so many other videos and interviews and presentations right here in our recordings. I also will be posting some of it on my website, speakwithpower.net, as well as some new events that are coming up as well. I'm gearing up to do a Speak with Power Academy, an online 8-week course. So watch out for that. And if you have any questions, please connect with me at leo@speakwithpower.net. or at Leonovsky Speaks. Obviously, those of you who are connected with me on Twitter know how to do it. Debbie, thank you again. It's been an absolute honor and a privilege. And to all of you watching, speak with power and live with passion.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.